and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be continuing with my college football game-by-game prediction and roster preview videos with the Michigan State Spartans. So of all the Power 4 coaching hires this year, the Michigan State hiring of Pat Fitzgerald is, I think, the only one I've not talked much about. And if you're a Michigan State fan, you're not going to like what I have to say. But I'm going to be honest. I don't think it's a good hire, and I think it's going to fail. But whether it works out or not, the first year is almost certain to be bad. So he was the head coach at Northwestern for a very long time, 17 years, and went 110 and 101 there, and had more success at Northwestern than anyone else has. He took them to 10 bowl games and even had 3 10-win seasons. But his last 2 years there were really bad, going 3-9 and then 1-11 before getting fired. And his last 2 years at Northwestern were the first 2 years of the transfer portal and NIL in college football. And he has been out of coaching for several years now. Now, he will have better fan support and recruiting abilities at Michigan State than he had at Northwestern. But Michigan State's 2026 recruiting class was really bad, ranking only 58th in the country, not getting any 5-star commitments and only 3 4-star commitments. And the portal group was overall really bad, ranking only 61st in the country. And Michigan State only returns 46% of their production, which ranks only 97th in the country. So starting on the offensive side of the roster, Michigan State was pretty bad here last year, averaging only 21.8 points per game, and I expect them to be just as bad this year. So at quarterback, while Fitzgerald did bring in a portal quarterback, it appears that he's going to start the quarterback that was already on Michigan State's roster. Eliso Milivojevic, I guess is his name. He was only a 3-star recruit. He started the last 4 games of the season at quarterback for Michigan State last year, and he did have some good moments, like throwing for 255 against Iowa. So he threw 173 passes and completed 111 of them, which is a pretty good 64.2% for 1,267 yards and a solid 7.3 yards per throw average, and threw 10 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. He played in 9 games as a redshirt freshman. I don't think he'll be one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten this year, but I do think he's an okay quarterback. But the wide receiver room on paper is pretty bad. No proven playmakers. They lose their best wide receiver from last season, Nick Marsh, and their really good tight end, Jack Veiling. So at running back, though, I think they will be better, bringing in Cam Edwards from Connecticut, who in 13 games last year on 210 carries had 1,240 yards and 15 touchdowns, averaging 5.9 a carry. And offensive line has been a big issue for Michigan State for several years now. Last year they gave up 37 sacks and averaged only 122.8 rushing yards per game, which ranked only 110th in the country. And they only have 1 starter returning, but they are trying to fix this some through the portal, bringing in at left tackle Ben Murawski from Connecticut, who last year started 12 games for them, and he wasn't elite in pass protection, giving up 4 sacks and 26 total pressures, but he's an elite run blocker. He had the best run blocking grade of all left tackles in the country, and they also bring in at center Trent Fraley, who started 29 games the past 2 years, and he comes from North Dakota State, but last year won the award for being the FCS's top center. Started 13 games for them last year and only allowed 1 sack and 9 total pressures. So I think their offensive line play will be a little bit better than it's been in a while. So now on the defensive side, they were pretty bad here last year, giving up 26.4 points per game on average, and I think they're going to be even worse this year. I think this is going to be one of the worst defenses in the country, probably going to give up over 30 points per game on average. So on the defensive line, they've got 2 starters coming back, and they did bring in 3 portal defensive linemen, but none of them were big additions. So against the run, they gave up on average last year 147.3 yards per game, which is solid, but I think that's going to be worse this year because I just don't see the players that they need to stop the run and pressure the quarterback on the defensive line. Now at linebacker, they've got Jordan Hall coming back, and he's one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten, and was their top tackler last year with 88 tackles. A future NFL player, no doubt, and the leader of their defense. He also had 2.5 sacks and 15 total quarterback pressures and 3 forced fumbles and an interception and a pass breakup. But the problem is, besides Jordan Hall, I don't see anyone great on this defense. They bring in 3 portal linebackers, but none of them were big additions. And in the secondary, they really struggled last year, giving up 231.3 yards passing per game, and I think that'll be even worse this year. They only have 1 full-time starter coming back in the secondary. And they brought in 6 defensive backs from the portal, but none of them were big additions. So now for the game-by-game predictions, starting with Toledo. So I strongly considered giving Michigan State a loss in this one, which is something I almost never do when it's Power 4 versus Group of 5 like this is. But Toledo is usually one of the better Group of 5 teams, and Michigan State I think is going to be a really bad Power 4 team. And I did look though at Toledo, and they rank near last in the country in returning production, so I am going to give Michigan State a win in this one. But this I think is going to be a 4-quarter game, and a very losable game still for Michigan State. Now Eastern Michigan, this is the one game that should be a blowout win for Michigan State, where they get to play their backups in the second half of it. But on the road at Notre Dame, there's no chance for Michigan State in that one. There's not much to say about it. It's going to be a blowout loss. There's nowhere on the roster that Michigan State can match up well with Notre Dame, or anywhere on their coaching staff where they can match up well with Notre Dame. So now Nebraska, this probably won't be a blowout loss, but it's probably going to be a double-digit loss. Those Nebraska wide receivers and the quarterback that Nebraska has, I think are going to have a big advantage over those Michigan State defensive backs. Now, Michigan State may be able to run some on Nebraska, because I'm not high at all on Nebraska's defensive line either. But Michigan State's wide receivers, I think, are going to be at a big disadvantage against those Nebraska defensive backs. So now on the road at Wisconsin. So I don't think Wisconsin's going to be a good team this year, but because it's on the road, and I do trust Wisconsin's defense bet more than Michigan State's. Well, Wisconsin's offensive line, I don't think will be like it used to be. It should be good enough to handle Michigan State's defensive line to where that new quarterback that they brought in, Colton Joseph, who had over 1,000 yards rushing a year ago at Old Dominion, and the really good running back that they brought in from Iowa State, Bo Sama, should have a lot of success at running on Michigan State, even though Wisconsin, at least on paper, doesn't really have the wide receivers to take advantage of a weak Michigan State secondary. So I have to give Wisconsin the win in that game. So now Illinois. I don't think Michigan State can handle the physicality of Illinois, and I think Illinois is going to have a lot of success running the football in this game. And I certainly feel a lot better right now about Brett Bielema as a coach than I do Pat Fitzgerald. And Illinois has the quarterback and some good receivers to where I think they can pick apart this bad Michigan State secondary. This is going to be another loss and probably not a close one either. So now Northwestern. So this is an interesting game for two reasons. One of them being obvious that Fitzgerald is the former head coach at Northwestern. However, he's been gone long enough that no current players on Northwestern's team would have played for him. But Fitzgerald was the one that actually hired a current Northwestern head coach, David Braun, to be his defensive coordinator. But they never ended up coaching any games together because Fitzgerald was fired in July of that year, not for his record, but because of accusations made by a former Northwestern player that he was making his players do humiliating things in private because of their poor on-field performance. And another interesting thing about this game is Northwestern's new quarterback is Aiden Childs, who has been the starting quarterback at Michigan State for most of these past two seasons. Now, he wasn't any good at Michigan State, but I think him and Chip Kelly could be a good match because he is a talented dual threat quarterback. And Northwestern, I think, has a much better defense than Michigan State, and I'd say they'd have a much better offense too with Chip Kelly calling the plays, because I said that Chip Kelly won't help Northwestern in games like against Oregon where their offensive line can't match up, but in games like against Michigan State, I think he's going to help their offense a lot, and I think Northwestern gets this win. So now on the road at UCLA. So unlike Michigan State, UCLA has brought in a new coach that I am very high on, and unlike Michigan State, he's put together a roster that I think he can have success immediately at UCLA. Looking at their roster, it's good enough that I think their biggest weakness may be still having Nico. I'm about to leave you at quarterback, but UCLA I expect to win this game and pretty big. So now on the road at Michigan in the rivalry game. So this is going to be a blowout loss for Michigan State. A huge coaching mismatch in favor of the Wolverines. And there's no way that Michigan State's going to be up for handling Michigan's toughness at the line of scrimmage. Even though Michigan may not have the quarterback or receivers to take advantage of Michigan State's weakness in the secondary, Michigan will just run all over them, and Michigan's defense will shut down Michigan State's offense. So now Washington, this will be a loss. That Michigan State secondary is going to be no match for Washington quarterback Damon Williams. And unlike Michigan State, Washington has a solid defense, so I don't see Michigan State scoring hardly anything in this game. And I'd certainly take Jed Fish right now over Pat Fitzgerald as a head coach. I don't see this game being that close. So now Oregon, so like the Notre Dame game, there's not much to say about this one. It's going to be a blowout loss. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon wins this game by 40. There's just nowhere on the roster or coaching staff where Michigan State can match up well with Oregon. So now on the road at Rutgers. So this is a very winnable game for Michigan State. I'm not high on Rutgers at all overall. I think their defense, like Michigan State's, is really going to struggle this year like it did last year. And their quarterback situation's very questionable. But Rutgers does have two game-changing players on offense that Michigan State doesn't have. KJ Duff at wide receiver, who I think will be a first round draft pick, and then Antoine Raymond at running back, who's one of the best running backs, not just in the Big Ten, but in college football. So that and home field advantage going to Rutgers is enough for me to give Rutgers the win in a game that I think will be pretty close. So my final prediction for Michigan State in 2026 is 2-10 overall and 0-9 in the conference. So looking at the roster, it didn't quite feel like a 2-10 bad team. It felt more like a 3 or 4 win team. But when I actually looked at the schedule, I just couldn't find any conference wins because they don't get to play Purdue, who is the one team in the Big Ten that I think Michigan State is clearly better than. But that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.